You're scrolling through home listings late at night, half curious, half hopeful, and every house that looks remotely livable somehow costs around $500,000. Not a mansion, not a luxury estate, just a normal three-bedroom with an average kitchen and a yard barely big enough for a grill. And you catch yourself doing mental math against your salary, wondering if you missed a promotion email or if the entire housing market quietly moved to a different reality without telling you. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear explained clearly. The issue usually isn't that you're bad with money or behind in life. It's that the math of a 500K home in today's United States market has become brutally disconnected from typical incomes. And once you break down the full, real cost of ownership instead of the simplified number shown on a listing, the picture becomes a lot less inspiring and a lot more revealing. So let's run the numbers the way a cautious financial planner would, not the optimistic version built to make a sale, but the version designed to protect your future self from years of financial stress. Starting with income, because that's the foundation everything else rests on. And while household incomes vary widely across the country, the median U.S. household income sits roughly in the 70K to 80K range, which means the average household is being told that a $500,000 home is normal, even though historically homes were often closer to 3 times annual income, not 6 or 7. And that ratio shift alone should make you pause, because it quietly means the traditional affordability framework no longer applies in many markets. Now, assume you actually attempt this purchase, and like most buyers, you don't put 20% down, which would require $100,000 in cash, which for many households would take years or even a decade to accumulate while juggling rent and daily expenses. So instead, you put down 10%, a more common scenario, which still means coming up with $50,000 up front, an amount that already eliminates a huge percentage of would-be buyers before we even get to the monthly payment. But let's say you manage it through disciplined saving, selling investments, or family help. You're now left with a $450,000 mortgage, and with interest rates that in recent years have hovered in the mid to high 6% range, depending on credit, your principal and interest payment alone likely lands around $2,800 to $3,100 per month. And that number is often the one people latch on to because it feels manageable at first glance, but it's only the beginning of what owning the house truly costs each month. Next come property taxes, which vary by state and county, but often average about 1 to 1.2% of home value annually, meaning roughly $5,000 to $6,000 per year on a 500K home, or about $420 to $500 per month. Then homeowners insurance, which has risen sharply in many regions due to increased rebuilding costs and climate-related risks, adding another $150 to $250 monthly depending on location. Then the expense that almost every first-time buyer underestimates, maintenance and repairs, where the long-standing guideline is budgeting about 1% of the home's value per year, so another $5,000 annually, or roughly $400+ per month. Because roofs age, plumbing leaks, appliances fail, and houses constantly demand attention even when nothing dramatic happens. And if your down payment was under 20%, we add private mortgage insurance, typically another $150 to $300 per month, a fee that protects the lender in case you default, but does nothing to protect your finances. So when you add these pieces together realistically, around $2,900 for principal and interest, $450 for property taxes, $200 for insurance, $420 for maintenance, and maybe $200 for PMI, you're looking at a total monthly housing cost hovering around $4,100 to $4,300 per month. And that's before unexpected repairs, HOA dues, or rising tax reassessments. Now, here's the key reality check. Financial planners often recommend keeping housing costs around 25 to 30% of gross income to maintain breathing room for saving, investing, and absorbing life's surprises. So if your housing costs are about $4,200 per month, you'd need roughly $14,000 to $15,000 in gross monthly income to stay comfortably within that range. And even stretching to a more aggressive ratio still suggests an income well above $150,000 annually, a level reached by a minority of households nationwide. which means the typical American family isn't just slightly stretched buying a 500K home, they're often operating far outside what traditional affordability guidelines consider stable. To make this less abstract, imagine a dual-income household earning $160,000 a year combined, a figure that sounds comfortably upper middle class, yet after federal taxes, payroll taxes, retirement contributions, and health insurance deductions, their take-home pay might realistically be around $8,500 to $9,000 per month, depending on their state and benefit choices. Subtract a $4,200 housing cost, and suddenly half of their usable income is gone before they even buy groceries. Then layer in two car payments and insurance, which can easily total $900 to $1,200, groceries for a household trying to eat reasonably healthy at $700 to $900, utilities and internet for a larger home, another $300 to $400, student loan payments for degrees that enabled those salaries, perhaps $300 to $600, commuting costs $200 to $300, and that remaining cushion shrinks fast, often leaving only a couple $1,000s for everything else, including clothing, travel, emergencies, and long-term investing. And that's not financial collapse, but it is financial fragility, the kind where one unexpected expense or job disruption forces difficult choices and mounting stress. And this is the difference almost nobody explains clearly. Qualifying for a mortgage is not the same as comfortably affording the home, because lenders primarily evaluate whether you can technically make the payment under current conditions, not whether the purchase supports a balanced financial life over the next 10 or 20 years. And in many cases, buyers stretch because culturally, home ownership is still framed as a mandatory milestone of adulthood and success, even though the economic environment has shifted dramatically, causing many people to chase homes at price points that previous generations would have considered aggressive rather than standard. Yet people do buy 500K homes every day, so who actually can afford them without constant stress? And the honest answer is a narrower group than social media implies. Households with dual high-paying careers in fields like technology, healthcare, finance, or engineering, buyers who roll significant equity from selling a previous property, individuals receiving meaningful family assistance for down payments, or households intentionally prioritizing housing over other spending categories, fully aware they're trading flexibility for ownership. And none of these paths are inherently wrong, but they're far from universal, which is why the narrative that a 500K home is normal can quietly mislead people into comparing their finances to households operating with very different resources. The deeper lesson here isn't about discouraging homeownership, but about redefining affordability in a realistic way. Because true affordability means more than surviving the monthly payment. It means still having the capacity to invest for retirement, build an emergency fund, handle maintenance without panic, and maintain some freedom in how you live your life. And that freedom is what ultimately creates long-term financial stability, not simply holding a mortgage on a valuable asset. So when you step back and look honestly at the numbers, the conclusion becomes clear. A 500K home in today's market generally aligns with household incomes solidly into the mid-six-figure range, or with additional financial advantages like large down payments or minimal debt. And recognizing that isn't pessimistic, it's empowering, because it helps you make decisions based on math rather than pressure. Whether that means waiting until income rises, choosing a lower price point, relocating to a more affordable region, or continuing to rent while investing the difference, which all can be financially rational paths depending on your situation. And the real goal isn't simply owning a house as quickly as possible. It's building a life where your housing supports your financial growth instead of quietly constraining it for decades.